Everyone. Today I am speaking with Tye Martin, who is a disability advocate and the host of a podcast called Tye Pod, which is a wonderful name. And I have had the honor of being a guest on not long ago, actually. Um, so how are you doing today?
Doing good. I was trying to remember what episode number you were, but I've lost track. But yeah, it was fairly recent.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know I remember having a blast with that talk. Like we really just got to know each other and like
Mhm.
talk about things. And it is always so interesting to me that um a lot of us in the disability community, we kind of find ways that we can like bond and just like have things in common with that you don't normally have like in the non-disabled community.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's a small world, really, when you think about it. And there's that common thread of disability we all have outside of diagnosis, even. I think that there's a lot of us have experiences that overlap at least.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, so I guess we can go ahead and get started. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, whether that's about your diagnoses or your social media presence or anything else that you feel comfortable sharing?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Well, I think just generally to start out, I do live with Duchenne muscular dystrophy, which is a progressive muscle weakening disease. And people ask me sometimes what that even really feels like, or is it like not feeling sensation in your muscles, or is the strength just gone? And it's interesting. Like I can feel basically every muscle down to my toes, and still flex and feel that things are there. It's just that lack of strength, almost like where maybe someone would get tired, who's more able-bodied. Like it's almost like the muscles just stay tired in a way, and just that
Mm.
strength is just sort of gone. But I try to think of a metaphor or like some clever way of describing what it feels like, but it's outside of that, I can't describe it much differently. Um,
Mhm.
and it is progressive. So I did lose the ability to walk first and started using a motorized scooter like you see in department stores. And not too many accidents, as I was first learning how to maneuver it. I did try a donut on the playground, and that ended up being a big crash. Um, yeah, outside of that, not too much damage, thankfully. Um, but yeah, like it was at such a young age. I just sort of rolled with the changes, when as the weakness got worse, I would adapt or find a new system of doing something, and then just learning to accept new versions of me as I go along, and yeah, it's caused big career pivots and changes in the support that I needed and things like that. But just it's not all of me, but it's the diagnosis obviously is a huge piece, and everything sort of feeds off of that. But yeah, that's kind of the general, explanation of kind of the diagnosis and kind of how I got to this point. But yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that. You made a lot of good points that I wanted to address. The first one being that you are not paralyzed. Just because you are in a wheelchair, that does not mean that you do not have feeling. And I think that that's a common misconception with wheelchair users. I just so happen to deal with paralysis, but someone like you, like it's not the case, and people tend to forget that. Um, and another thing that I wanted to ask is, so I like to name my wheelchairs and my medical equipment.
Love it. I love it.
So my first motorized wheelchair, I named him Wheelson, and now my
Nice.
second one, yeah, is William.
Wow, I appreciate that.
And my crutches are Salt and Pepper.
Nice. See, those are
So
those are good names.
Yeah, it takes a lot of, like,
Play on
thinking.
words. Yeah.
Yeah, Do you have a name for your wheelchair?
I tried, I can't come up with a good one for it still. It's funny, I ended up getting oh, it was like one of those little plushy doll things that was in the shape of a gallbladder, and I named it Lady Gaga. Like I spent all this time thinking about it, trying to come up with a name, but I still can't think of one for the chair that fits, and I don't know why. And then like the ventilator that I use now, it makes like all the Star Wars or like Star Trek fans out there, like it makes like droid, robot type noises, and
Mhm,
I need to find a name for that too. But honestly, like that, I haven't gotten one for the chair yet.
mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's an
I mean,
active. It's got a place in my brain. At some point, I'll come up with one. But um, yeah,
yeah, let me know when you do,
well, you
because
give me
that's
food for
always
thought
fun.
because yeah, the play on words that you've used is that gives me like a good start. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like, when you're in situations like ours
Mhm.
where you're dealing with these equipment every day, you might as well make it
Oh
fun.
yeah, yeah. It doesn't hurt to have kind of some whimsical stuff, like just some little funny, simple things. It makes the days go by a little bit easier or better, I think.
Yeah,
But I was going to touch on the paralysis thing too. Like even if you just say you focus on just powered chair scooter users, there's so much nuance and difference between what the reason is that you're needing it, and even like the control systems, right? Like just because you have to use something other than the joystick, like I know there's like head controls, or even like there's I don't know if you've seen like the breathing. There's almost like
yeah,
like a tube that just goes up. You can control it by how hard you blow into this tube. Like there's so
mhm,
much that you can do with the technology now, and I think people get in the habit of thinking like, oh well, they're in a power chair because just paralysis, or they're in a like a manual chair because it was just like the waist down, right? Like so, there's just so much detail, so many different things that people deal with that could cause the need for a chair. And so I think people, the able-bodied population, or even some of the disabled community, like I just think that we can't just assume anything about the person until we know them.
yeah, exactly. Even like myself, I'm a ambulatory wheelchair user, so whenever I get up from my chair, people act so shocked, like all of a sudden a miracle happened.
Have
And
you
I
ever gotten
laugh
accused
every
of like
time.
not needing it, of like doing
Yeah,
it just yeah?
all
That's
the
the one that
time.
I can't even imagine how that feels to deal with.
It's like a backhanded compliment. It's like their intention is to make you feel good about yourself that you can
Mhm.
walk, but it's like you're still making me feel bad about myself for needing it at times. And also, um, it's not like just because I can walk that I'm
Mhm.
all of a sudden better than like the
Right,
rest of the disability community. Like
right.
that's not right.
That actually, that I have a question for you on that. So like some people, and I don't want to minimize that it is a big deal for some, but like being able to achieve something, say walking across the stage at a graduation when you need assistance from crutches, walker, wheelchair, anything, it's almost like walking across the stage, like showing that you have the ability to do something able-bodied becomes bigger than actually accepting your degree, and like all the years of study and mental everything you put into that degree is well beyond what the accomplishment of walking across the stage is, in my opinion. So like what's your take on some who I guess who think that that's a bigger accomplishment than the degree itself?
Yeah, that's a good point, especially now that this time of year is like graduation
Right.
time. I think that it's it shouldn't be the main focus. It's again, it's one of those where it's like because you have the ability to walk across the stage,
Mm-hmm.
especially if you typically use a wheelchair, it does not mean that all of a sudden like your accomplishment is like so much more meaningful.
Mm-hmm.
Like the focus should be on finishing your degree.
Right.
Yeah, like, and I am not here to judge, of course, but
Mm-hmm.
sometimes people who are disabled, they kind of feed into that. And
Right.
unfortunately, I find that I've seen people who uh they want that to be the main focus, where
Mm-hmm.
like they work really hard to walk across that stage just to prove the point of them being able to walk, which equals them being like better.
Even like a almost like a defiance thing, or like I don't know, like a us against the world type approach. Like I'm going to do this, even though you say I can't, and it dives into that inspiration porn idea too. I think
Yeah.
that you know people just put all this stock into doing something able-bodied, and at some point, most of the population is going to deal with some physical issue. You know, I mean,
Hmm.
even if it's in old age, and it's just like for that to be such a taboo thing, or like making such a big deal out of something so small. You know, like I just I don't want to say it's always that way, or condemn if
Hmm.
someone does want to walk across the stage, but I'm just like, that should not be your total being in a matter of minutes walking across the stage. But
Hmm.
no, I wanted to get your thoughts on that because I know that that's digs into a lot of the things that are just generalized about disability to me.
Yeah. I think like an important point is that like if you want to walk across the stage to prove to yourself that you can do it,
Mm-hmm.
that's one thing. But if you're trying to prove to the audience that you can do it, like that is not really like I don't believe in that.
Mm-hmm. Attention grabbing kind of.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, I agree.
And it kind of like hurts me to see that like there are people in the disability community that feed into that.
Yeah, I agree.
That I feel like that could be like a whole discussion,
I do
like a
too.
whole episode by itself.
Well, you could definitely break it down. Yeah, it's a complicated issue.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I mean, uh maybe we could find a way to kind of like talk about it as we move on to the next question
Yeah,
or questions. But so do you consider yourself to have confidence or lack confidence as a disabled person?
I think at times for sure. Like there are. It's interesting because say academics, for example, like I was always really good at that in elementary, high school, and I think a lot of times with disability, there's a natural tendency to try to balance it back the other way and say, okay, well, I'm losing function, you know, like physical function. I can't walk or do, near the things I could. And so like, oh, I have to compensate. I have to achieve high things academically or mentally, however you want to look at it, intellectually to show that, hey, I'm capable.
Mm.
And it also, I want to stress too, like because you have a physical disability, that it doesn't mean anything about your mental disability or ability. I mean, like you can have both together, you can have one or the other, and not it's not wrong for whatever the case is. But I think the tendency is a lot of us think, oh well, society's looking at me like I have a physical disability automatically. They think there's something wrong with me mentally, and so I have to somehow, you know, prove that wrong. And I don't think I had that very much growing up, but I know early on there were some times where I felt that, like I had to measure up basically.
Mm.
Um, and then there were also times where I felt like, sure, my legs weren't functioning, but I had to prove that I had a certain amount of function in the upper body. Um, and again, that got me into some trouble because the disability and the diagnosis I have is progressive with all the muscles. And so
Mm.
eventually I would lose strength in my shoulders, being able to raise my hand up to my mouth to eat, door handles, like all these things, reaching up to grab a paper or shake somebody's hand, like that became an issue. So I mean, like all those things kind of tear at the whole confidence, being feeling good in your own skin and like you're human too. So I think I had to get used to each time there was a reinvention in a way of myself. And that obviously you have to build your confidence back up. Um,
Mhm.
and even years later, like in graduate school and even during COVID, I was feeling like, well, all my work is computational and I'm home all the time. So like I have all these hours. So like this is my chance to get, either match productivity or I should be getting more done than anybody else because I'm at home on the computer. And that is not the case. And that it shouldn't be the case. Like we should not feel that kind of pressure to always be producing. And that the academic world is really good at making you feel inferior, like you haven't done enough, you don't have enough research articles, you haven't given enough talks, and as you, if you're trying to become a professor, you have to do more and more. You have to get research grants to fund the research you're doing. So like hundreds of thousands of dollars to support you and any students that might be working with you. And so that just that production, and a lot of times you're teaching as well each semester, so you stack all these jobs together, plus your disability is getting worse. That really started to degrade my confidence, and I think it was burnout, obviously, that did it. And so early on, and even through my dissertation defense, I was very confident in that side of me. Like I was like, yes, I can do the research, I can justify it, or answer questions, things like that. I think that was until recently that was all really strong. But things like I know we talked a little about romantic relationships, dating, intimacy, all that stuff like that. Once you approach that topic, I've always had confidence issues there, like way back. But academically, like that was never a thing until my health went, really south. So like if that kind of gives you an idea of the different parts of me, I feel like it's not so much that I can say I've had trouble being confident or not. It's like it depends on at what point, like where my disability was, what the topic is. It's I feel like everything is just complicated.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that for anyone, really, confidence is not like a 24/7 thing. Everyone deals with their moments, but I think that is especially true with a disability.
Mm-hmm,
And that's even more true when it's a disability that is progressive, such as yours. I personally, like, my disability is not progressive, but
mm-hmm,
I think, like, all, to my understanding, physical disabilities kind of age you quicker than the average person. So, like, my body is like probably like a 50-year-old right now,
I
and
feel that
yeah, like right now as we're talking, I'm dealing with aches and pains, and
same.
like like it's understandable that it would like I guess interfere with your confidence levels because it makes you wonder like uh am I worthy of like any type of relationship,
Mm-hmm,
romantic, platonic, sexual, any of that, or just like worthy in general, compared to the general population who does not deal with these things.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that it's I can't speak for your experience, of course, but maybe you can tell me about like the difference between how you felt before things as you described
Mm-hmm.
with your health going south. What was that like before versus what it's like now?
Yeah, like first of all, on the aging thing, I feel the new wrinkles forming daily almost. It's a constant, and I graduate school, I joke that it caused the gray hair to start coming, but really, I think it was the ICU and the gallbladder and being put on the ventilator. I think all the health and medical stress I feel like has multiplied the gray hairs a lot. So I think that you're right. You do feel, with a physical disability, you mentally you go through a lot. Like it affects how you feel about things like, worthiness, like you were talking about. And I mean it plays a real role in our self-perceived age, if you want to call it that. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, and looking on kind of where I was before, I so basically I had completed my PhD work. I was doing a postdoc, and like obviously the muscle progression was the weakness was there. And at the time I finished, like I was having to get help with eating and drinking. But speaking, going to meetings, I was able to hold my laptop like on my legs and type, and as long as there was something sort of supporting it. So like I was able to do enough, to basically to succeed with graduate school. And and get help from caregivers maybe every, you know, 2 to 3 hours, which, again, like still that's a challenge, right? Because you're having to meet somebody to help you every 2 to 3 hours with something as routine as most people would think, like going to the restroom, or you need to go wash your hand, like whatever little task. There's all these little tasks that people do. Even like things like rubbing my forehead. Like I can't, like people do that. It's like a tick or something that they just naturally, and so like I was never able to have those since way back when I was in, before high school. But again, like it was at a place over 8 to 10 years, things were relatively stable. And university life, like I was commuting, but it was just like in this phase where I don't want to say I took it for granted, but like it was just in a very flat place as far as progression of the disease. But yeah, that kind of, I think COVID obviously put a level of stress that none of us had seen before, like whatever our ability was, and that propelled everything the wrong direction. And so like I basically everything about my career sort of hit a hard stop. Like right after the pandemic had started out, like around 21 or two. So yeah, like that hit really hard. Like I was in the hospital with this gallbladder, and I had to relearn, like I had to go through a lot of therapy and like learning how to work with a ventilator and rehab enough to like to use my chair. Like I couldn't get in my van, like I couldn't park in the normal place. I had to actually stay almost fully reclined. My legs were up. And so like I was parked sideways in my van to go to appointments because it hurt. Like I could not flex my legs enough or raise up my shoulders. Like it took work just to get close to where I was, and so like all that became, I tell people, well, like it's a full-time job managing the disease itself. And so like there's just a huge difference in where I was before. And just again, you feel like you have to redefine your entire person in a way. Um, yeah, but it's been a journey, no doubt.
Yeah. Yeah, I can tell that it is very different between you and I,
Mm,
where like your disability is progressive and mine is not, as I mentioned. And just like I was saying earlier, where I deal with paralysis and you do not. So like I think the idea that all disabled people are the same is something that people need to kind of learn that that is not the truth. And honestly, like just thinking about my own experiences with like health issues that don't even add up to like how intense it seems like yours were, um, it's understandable that it would kind of like make it difficult to be confident because
mm,
on one hand, you want to be like everyone else, where you're productive and doing what it is that the world thinks you should be doing, but sometimes it's not always possible. And I think that that is a difficult thing to come to terms with.
yeah, yeah,
Um, I like, especially in today's world where like people are just expected to be productive at all times, and it's just um, like it's almost as if your worth is tied to how productive you
mm,
are.
yeah,
So it makes sense that people who are dealing with a lot of medical issues would struggle to feel worthy.
yeah, yeah. And I think even I was going to make that comparison before. It's like someone able-bodied that is able to be like a pro athlete or something like that, or like I don't know, go to the Olympics or something, like that sort of, I guess the average person who's able-bodied can't do a lot of those things, but for some reason they're not, like that's not so much an issue. It doesn't seem like their worth isn't tied to the ability in that way. But also I see what you're saying too about like jobs in general, like being a quote unquote productive member of society, and it's tied to like money and status, and you know like are you able to be your typical American citizen or something, right? Like there's all that, the pressure to like, well, you have to get married or you have a family or like you have to retire at this age with this amount of money. And it's all of that is total garbage. I mean, like
It is.
none of
Yeah.
that, like that's not even what the country should like. That's not what it should be about with any. I mean, anybody with anything. I don't
Yeah.
think. And I mean, I was there. Like I was feeling that pressure in graduate school. Like, hey, I need to keep rising up the ladder. And it's so hard because you lose track of like in the moment things or like things that you experience as you're going because you're always looking like you're trying to hit that perfect standard and it's not possible. And like balancing my job and the disability took away a lot of other things that are important to me now that I'm doing. I mean, it's just crazy to me that there's still the emphasis and COVID. I don't know how you feel about it, but I thought COVID would have taught some lessons on or like changed something. And it did for like a few years, but then it was almost like, well, society feels behind. Like they just have to double the work or double the productivity. And I don't know what it would take to change it, to be honest, anymore. I just don't. I don't
I know.
think,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't think it's possible.
It's I don't think in our lifetime that this is going to change because
No.
we had it so good during the pandemic where a lot of us with disabilities were able to work because there was a work from home option. Um, and that is something else that I wanted to bring up where like
Mm,
we are expected to be productive and yet the world is not built for us to be productive. And that's a good example of what that's like where we could easily have jobs that could be work from home, but
mhm.
all of a sudden they brought back the normal work
Return to work,
routine.
right?
Yeah. And now a lot of people with disabilities who were once working are now left jobless because they cannot meet those standards.
Right.
Um, I think like in my situation, I am fortunate because I am a therapist and I can do like my job is all remote. So I don't have to go into an office, but I think that if I didn't have that opportunity, I would be so lost. Like why did I get all of that education and that license to
hmm
practice and yet I can't use it if, like if it's not
Right.
made for us.
And I feel that way too. It's a privilege to be able to have a career that is like at least hybrid, right? Where you can spend
Right.
part or majority of your job working remote. And I think that honestly, people who aren't disabled should be able to do that too. Like
Yeah.
I think there are jobs that could easily be at least hybrid, um, and that would open up society in a different way. I think that would be, I mean, there would be a lot more time even to just develop like empathy or like to do things outside of work that are important. Like, I mean, I don't know. I just think like creativity and hobbies, like enjoying
Yeah.
things, forming relationships, whether they're platonic, romantic, whatever they are. Like I just think that all those things would improve you know
Yeah.
if that crazy intensity was like toned down just a bit. And I want to say too, like some might think that well, the expense of the pandemic is not worth like what disabled like what our community gained, and it's never for me. It's never about that. It's like you can have both. You can have a bad situation, but you can also try to do or to use to gain in some way. And it's not that we want that kind of thing to happen, but it happens. We don't have control over it, but we have control over, what comes after. And I think us finally being able to get across to a lot of people like, hey, this is you can be productive at home in a way that's different than in person, but like you can adapt, you can change the way you're doing things and still make it work without needing a pandemic to force that. But again, now that the pandemic's over, I'm not sure that's none of it seems to have sunk in for a lot of the population. But you know, hopefully it did make a difference to some.
Yeah, I think like you make a good point how accessibility benefits everyone. Like even people who have families that they have children that they need to take care of,
Mm,
they could do that more often and like they should if they were working from home.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, the way that this world, at least for now, is built, it's not possible for whatever excuse that they have. Like that's the cost of like uh so I heard recently that it's because a lot of businesses they already have an office and because they have to pay the
Mm,
lease or whatever for that building or whatever, they don't want it to go to waste basically.
yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
like that's not our problem.
Right. And I can't help but think like on the other side, we're paying for gas, right? To
Yeah.
like get from work to home, and it's astronomically high. The roads, the bridge infrastructure, like potholes. Like, can
Hmm.
you imagine if there was a reduction in, just going, just to, it feels like just to go, like the wear
Hmm.
and tear on everything. I think there'd be time to make changes that would make things, more, I guess, well, safer on one side, but also just more comfortable.
Hmm.
And even like say retrofitting things to make them more accessible. Like if people are there a few less hours a week, maybe there could be some attention to improving the accessibility. Like I don't know,
Yeah.
I just think that pressure to just and you're right. I mean, there are businesses have money they've invested into things, and that's right. But like think about the number of times we have to create or overcome something that the situation is not perfect, but we got to figure out some way to adapt or change it or do something in a way that maybe we hadn't planned. Like businesses might have to do that too, and I mean, that's just kind of the world we live in. There was a video, I think it was a reel or something. I saw it. I don't even remember who posted it, but it showed like, what if the world was all wheelchair users except for a few people that were walking with their legs? Like, what would it look like if everything was ramps, everything was elevators? Like what? I mean, I guess the first thing I would think of was like the people walking around like their toes might look a little bit bruised or something. But it's like, well, what if you flipped it? What if you? And I wish there was a way to, not in a suffering or pain kind of way, but just like show the world, like the able-bodied world, like if you're in a wheelchair for a day and you can only do X, Y, and Z tasks, like what would it feel like, or what would you gain from that perspective? Um, and I don't think there's, even with virtual reality, I just don't think there's not a way to actually show that. But I don't know. I think about if there was more focus on just general accessibility, what it would be like. Um, yeah, and maybe that's me not having a regular 9 to 5 job that I'm able to, you know, think about stuff or like daydream that kind of stuff again. But um, anyway, yeah,
But even so I don't have a 9 to 5. I work very part-time. I only
yeah,
have 8 clients. So that's like 8 hours of sessions a week and then a few hours to do notes. But um I think that's another thing where there are so limited amount of part-time jobs or per diem jobs that disabled people have the option to do.
hmm,
So like I think again that's one of the other ways that I'm fortunate enough to be able to work so that I could take care of my other needs like doctor's appointments and all of that. Um, so like there's just a whole like thing that's just messed up about the way the accessibility issue is right now, and it's crazy to think that there were times where this was worse. That's
yeah.
and that's another thing where like we're expected to be grateful because things are improving, but they're still
See,
not where we need it to be.
right, and that whole idea of being grateful. I mean, that's like again with things like you should be able like be grateful that you're even breathing or that you're here. It's like able-bodied, like they don't have to go through, like they don't have someone telling them that they should be happy to just be here. It's like, well, like how would that feel to anybody else? Like if someone just one day told you like you're not going to get up or do anything else, you're going to lay here, but you got to be grateful that you're breathing. It's like that's the most dehumanizing thing
Yeah.
ever.
Hmm.
Yeah, it is.
And I think that that makes me think of just all minorities, especially
Mm,
like racial minorities, where uh, like something that racial minorities and the disability community have in common is that
mhm.
people see the anger that we have as like being ungrateful, where it's understandable that a person in a minority group who doesn't have all their needs met would be angry.
Right,
Like, just because we're not dealing with like things from, I don't know, like a century ago, like it
right.
doesn't mean that things are perfect
Well,
now.
you can appreciate the growth and improvements while also not being satisfied with where it's at because you look at, like the white cis male, like you look at the privileged parts of society and they still have it different. They still have more. So
Yep.
I mean, until that equality level is even, we should never be just grateful if we're disabled or minority or like being Pride Month, like with the LGBTQ plus community. It's like as long as any of us are held lower standard than somebody else, there's always going to be room to improve and get better, and we shouldn't be just satisfied with status quo. I don't think.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like something that I tell my clients all the time is that two things can be true at the same time. Like
Hmm.
you're saying, you can be grateful but aware that things could be better. It does not take away from the gratitude. It just means that you know you deserve better.
And why does it have to be so binary with everything in America?
Right.
Like you have to choose a side, right? Like you can't. Every issue has to be conflict, and I don't
Yeah.
understand that. Every day, I'm more and more aware how there's gray area, right? Like there is no clear yes and no, black and white like scenario, right?
Hmm.
Like yeah, we can be angry with parts of our life and parts of our situation, but we can also be good with others. I mean, it's people just like to have something to fight about. I think.
Yeah. I think like it's only dividing people more than we already are. Um, like the different opinions, nobody wants to take the time to understand a person's perspective. They just want to be able to speak for them, even if they're not a part of the identity that the other person is. So they don't have the lived experience of somebody
Mm,
like a disabled person or a racial minority or the
yeah,
queer community. Like it's a whole like disaster.
I agree. And then there is that hierarchy of even in the disabled, well, like any minority group, like there are still members of the communities that need to do more. That they're also privileged, and they hold people, below themselves. And it's just like the less disabling your situation is, the more entitled or the more status you feel. And you see it too often, even on social media, how like, well, some people with disabilities are still not fully aware. And again, okay, it's like there I was being black and white issue on that. Like I thought when I was first coming into like not being an influencer, but just like being in advocacy of any type. Like, I thought, well, you're either, if you're disabled, automatically, you should have the sympathy. You should kind of understand what's going on. And if you're not, then maybe you don't. But it's both sides, like there's some able-bodied people that are super empathetic and do get what the needs are and why we need them. Like that you have extremes on both sides. And, the unfortunate thing is we can't always depend on other disabled people to support what we're fighting for, really.
Yeah, I think that like interdependence on each other as disabled people, but also like disabled allies, like or I should say like allies of the disability community who are not
Mm,
disabled, who have the power to advocate for things that we need that we don't necessarily know how to or have the power to advocate for. Um
yeah,
yeah, I mean that is a really interesting point.
yeah, but it's definitely a place I think there's work to be done.
Yeah, absolutely. just like everything else.
Nothing's easy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So my last question for you is what advice would you give a disabled person who lacks confidence?
Mm. Like first thing I would say is to look for the community online. Like I know we just talked about it's not always there's not always people with disabilities that can help, but in general, like for the most part, there's a lot to help you through things. And like and I've gone through this too. Like you think you're going through something alone, but there's many more people that know exactly what, or at least enough of what you're feeling that you can reach out and talk and communicate. And there's ways, and like that's the cool thing too is like regardless of disability, you can find ways to communicate in some way. Like there's all of these influencers that are making things accessible for people that are blind or deaf or have a physical disability. I mean, there's just so many ways to get help now that weren't there before. And like I just think that alone is the biggest piece of advice I would give to somebody because that was me. Like if I would have had that or knew how tight knit the community was like before things got severe, I think things would have gotten. I mean, I could have improved things better before it got as bad as it did.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that is knowing there's community out there in some way is is the best part.
Yeah, and that's really good advice. I think that no matter what the situation, healing happens with community,
Mm,
where a person is able to recognize that they are not alone in their experiences, whether it's mental health, physical health, anything, even not in situations like that. Like,
mm,
I think when people are so, I guess, like unaware of their surroundings and like so stuck in their own head, they
mm,
aren't able to recognize that they have a whole community available
yeah.
to support them. And that includes things even like mutual aid, where
Mhm.
people who are dealing with financial struggles, they ask for support
Mm.
mainly through social media and they are able to meet their needs that way.
That's a good point. That is really good. And like if you're in a situation and you think you know need to focus on something like making sure you have enough financial aid and all that kind of stuff, like you can it's amazing how little effort really it takes to get some feedback, you know, from the community. And there's creative ways to get, you know, get financial help, to get assistive devices. And it's not always easy, but there are tools out there that, you know, I wish I would have known about earlier on. And I think that's the cool thing about where we are as the community right now is that we're a pretty resourceful group for sure.
Yeah, and I think like you mentioned earlier about the pandemic,
Mhm.
like the use of social media has helped us so much, especially in the disability community, to connect with others in a time where we had to isolate ourselves so
Yeah.
that we wouldn't get sick. And because of that isolation, a lot of us, we were dealing with things like anxiety and depression
Mm,
and
yeah.
other mental health conditions. And without community, a lot of us would not be here today.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And I think, you know, tying that into to like when I started the podcast, like what that's I mean, that's just a very small example of, you know, like we recently reached 100 guests and it's like what scenario where would you have envisioned meeting so many different people and learning about how they approach like challenges and you know how they overcome things that they do. It's just like I know it's not perfect and it's easy to find negative things in social media. Like those don't go away. But I still feel like all in all it's a positive thing. And there's ways for us to connect now that, you know, there really never were even 10, 15 years ago. And so you know, I don't feel toxically positive, but I think optimistic is the right word for it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that we are lucky enough to be around in this day and age where we have the ability to meet people from different states or even different countries that
Hmm.
we would not have met otherwise. And with that being said, I am super grateful to have met you through social media and connected with you. and we've gotten to know each other just by me being a guest on your podcast and you being a guest on my
Yeah.
sort of podcast. I don't know what this
Hey, it
is.
feels like if it's a conversation, it's a podcast to me. So,
Yeah.
but I guess I don't meet the technical definition, but no, it's great being able to reach out, and connect that way. And, it is, you really do get to know people through social media. I know it's not, a lot of people would say it's not real life, but it is to me, like where things are now. Like I mean, there's nothing fake about the conversations, I don't think.
Right. Yeah, and I'm really happy that we are ending on like a positive note where we are able to recognize that like disability comes with, of course, its challenges, but it also comes with community.
Yeah,
And that is something to definitely not take for granted.
right. No, I think toxic negativity is also an easy thing to have. And so yeah, I
Hmm.
really appreciate, like your questions being ones that, sure, there's hard parts, but like I think it led us to a good place in the end. Like it benefited both sides. So yeah,
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time.
yeah, definitely. Sure appreciate it.
And so if anyone wants to follow you, how can they listen to your podcast or follow you on social media?
Yeah, well, the Tye Pod is the name of the podcast, and it's on YouTube. There's a video component there, but if you want audio, it's on Apple Podcast and Spotify too. And the Instagram handle, that's where you can kind of go to find most of the podcast details and like a few other things here and there. But it's the Tye Pod with a period after the Tye. Yeah, so two periods.
Hmm.
Yeah, and that's how you can
Yeah.
find it.